to have been moved and seconded. Accordingly, the question is as follows, that this House do now adjourn.
Member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first posed this question in question period on October 11th, and surprisingly enough, I didn't get a satisfactory response. I just learned that week, and by way of background, Mr. Speaker, I was the only member of Parliament who actually obtained intervenor status at the then National Energy Board hearings into the proposed Kinder Morgan pipeline. I think it's safe to say I'm the only Canadian who read all of the so-called evidence submitted by Kinder Morgan. I'm very familiar with this file, in other words. And still, I was shocked first when we bought and then built the pipeline at a waste of $34 billion. But through this whole thing, the City of Burnaby has been consistent in saying it must not expand. The Burnaby tank farm, which is a tanks of diluted bitumen and other fossil fuel products that are highly flammable, the Burnaby Fire Department had been consistent in saying, we don't have the capacity to put out a tank farm fire. And they also pointed out that the university at the top of the mountain, various communities at the top of the mountain, have Simon Fraser University. There's only one road out in the event of fire. There's a significant risk to life and limb. In other words, the community of Burnaby had been, maybe one would say, a thorn in the side of what was this project. To my horror, of course, the Government of Canada, as I mentioned, bought the project, built the project, and the Trans Mountain Pipeline is now something all Canadians, all of us in this room, share in that one thing, if nothing else. We own the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We've wasted all the money on it. And now, what we discovered right in the same week in which I asked the question, October 11th, our tax dollars at work, we've bribed the City of Burnaby to stop criticizing the pipeline and not to mention anymore the risk of fire that would threaten the communities of Burnaby, particularly Simon Fraser University on Burnaby Mountain. Now, what they did was they offered $21 million over 20 years and came along with that a gag order. Do not criticize the pipeline anymore, you people in Burnaby. You're not allowed to say anything about the Kinder Morgan, now Trans Mountain Pipeline. Astonishing, you say, that we would, as a federal government, pour $34 billion into violating Indigenous rights, ignoring the various concerns for the environment about what would happen or what will happen, because it's more of a certainty than a potential risk, if there was a spill of diluted bitumen, which behaves very differently in a marine environment than even the most horrible of crude oil spills like Exxon Valdez. We also have the risk of a tank farm fire in Burnaby. Now, the answer I got from the Minister of Finance was certainly very generous and nice about my own reputation as a climate activist, but failed to answer the question, which was, does this government know about this? Did the federal cabinet understand that our Crown Corporation, Trans Mountain, was prepared now to put $21 million into stopping the people of Burnaby from being protected and their fire department from speaking out about this? For those who may watch this on video, I ask you to go to Google and Google this. Only one bear in 100 bites, but they don't come in order. This is a very instructive video about the nature of tank farm fires around the world, produced by that old folk singer, my hero, Bob Bosson, who lives on Gabriola Island and knows whereof he speaks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, the short answer to the question is no and no. But let me go on. As the Honourable Member knows, Trans Mountain Corporation is governed by an independent board of directors, not directly by the government. The board has broad authority for corporate governance, strategy, and nominates several committees to oversee specific specialized areas. Trans Mountain Corporation operates as a commercial entity and has been clear that it is committed to meaningful engagement and effective relationships with communities all along the pipeline expansion corridor. Now, in October, TMC and the City of Burnaby shared a community contribution agreement that will benefit the residents of Burnaby through collaboration on an enhanced emergency response and safety plan. The details of this agreement include, as the honourable member said, Trans Mountain contributing $20.1 million to the city, and as Burnaby's Mayor Mike Hurley said, he and any member of council are allowed to speak freely about this project and the contribution agreement itself. I know those two parties work closely to determine the details of this agreement. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, the government acquired the Trans Mountain Corporation and the Trans Mountain Expansion Project in 2018 because we knew it was a serious and necessary investment. The pipeline will continue to benefit our economy and Canadians, including those in communities like Burnaby, by providing good jobs, generating significant revenues each year, and being an integral part of Canada's long-term energy infrastructure as Canada and the world transitions to net zero. To support this transition to net zero, since 2015, the federal government has committed over $160 billion to build Canada's clean economy and reduce emissions, and has invested significant additional resources to protect the environment and conserve nature. As the expansion project generates cash flow, the federal government will continue to invest in creating good-paying jobs and accelerating the development and deployment of clean energy and clean technology. The project has also created and is continuing to create economic benefits for families and many Indigenous communities through contracting, financial compensation, and employment and training. And Mr. Speaker, that is all I will have to say about that. But just to repeat myself, I could have finished that in 20 seconds. The answer to the honourable member's question is no and no.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
It's outrageous to imagine that so many millions of dollars can be spent bribing a municipality not to protect its citizens, and no one in Cabinet knows about it. But that's what happens when we have what's called a non-budgetary transaction, in which magically former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, without approvals from anyone, decided we have this value of $34 billion over here. We're going to convert it to a value of $34 billion over here in a project that is of dubious value, creates fewer jobs than if somebody locally opened a White Spot restaurant. We have, Mr. Speaker, before us a scandal and a shame, and I'm sorry for the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary that he's now associated himself with it. He's not to blame. But the Government of Canada has done something egregious in doing something that Kinder Morgan had already decided, and this can be proven, but not in the 30 seconds I have left. The Kinder Morgan had already decided this was not a profitable project. The Canadians, as a people, paid for it, and I'm afraid we will pay for it again in environmental damage.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
As I've said previously in the speech, Mr. Speaker, those questions, there was a contribution agreement signed between the City of Burnaby and TMX. Those questions would be better asked to the City of Burnaby, but I would put my faith into the Mayor. I would hope that he and Council was assured that they can speak freely to this particular issue and no gag orders was put on themselves. Thank you.
The honourable member.